started right on time. And for starters, could everyone go on mute? I'm trying to, someone said there might be a mute button for all, but I'm not finding it. So anyway, just kind of go on mute and that will make life easy for everybody. All right, if you do that, everyone. All right, so listen up. I'm happy to see you all here again. And what I'm going to try to do in this time that we have together is again engage you in cycle 1 of CalTPA, and to really entertain any questions and concerns that you might have. And then I want to just start focusing on a few things. And then I have a student here who's going to be presenting today. He's completed cycle 1, and he's been gracious enough to come on and sort of share with you his experience and then engage you in questions as well. And I think everyone's on mute. It's kind of working right now. So the first thing I want to do is let you know that I sent a cycle 1. I sent a bunch of emails out this morning, and you all are probably going, what is this guy doing? So I tried to send it to you. Initially, it was too large. And then I went to a Dropbox, and a lot of people couldn't access the Dropbox. So what I did was I sent the email again this morning, and I sent it in like, I think 3 different emails, but each email had enough information, all the documents there. And what I sent was an example of a completed example, graded and everything, of cycle 1. So what you should do is you should engage in that document. If you haven't opened it yet, I encourage you to open it this weekend and spend a lot of time reading through what that individual put together. Look at the videos with a critical eye, pay close attention to what the student did in his interaction with his students, read everything the student wrote, and use that to inform how you build and structure your document. I teach a cycle 2 with another class, and last night we spent time in groups going over that, dissecting the language that this individual used, and you should use the same language. A lot of the language that you use, a lot of the terminology is terminology that doesn't belong to one person, it belongs to everybody. You can use that terminology and let it guide how you structure your writing portion of your document. And remember, how you write this part for cycle 1, a big chunk of that is going to be used again in cycle 2. So it behooves you to do it right, use that academic language. And then I want to introduce another term to you. And you should all know this term. It's called Bloom's taxonomy. You should be holding that close to your vest, almost like a second Bible. And you can use Bloom's taxonomy to get that academic language and to structure and guide how you build your lessons and let it inform throughout your document. Those first 9 pages that you put together should be very strong. And all the documents that we talked about last week, you should be using them again this week. I sent you an email. You need all kinds of standards in there. So everything we talked about last week, add Bloom's taxonomy onto that and let that inform and guide how you think about building these initial 9 pages. And then I'll tell you one more thing. I had talked with a student who wasn't successful in passing the cycle 1. So I'm meeting with the student, one-on-one to do some in-depth talking. And what I did was I went in and I pulled the student's exam down. And the student just didn't, I didn't see any real academic language In the student's write-up, the student was being very vague and unclear in laying out that first initial information. And this is where that student lost a lot of points. When you start thinking about building that initial 9 pages, you have got to understand that the reader is looking through your documents, and everything that you lay out is what informs that reader. And I need everyone to please go mute. If you do that, I'll be very grateful. All right. So everything that you write is going to inform that person, and it's going to set the stage for step 1, 2, 3, and 4. Each of these steps are connected. And if you go sloppy on one step, it's going to affect every other step. As you read through these documents I showed you, this cycle 1, pay attention to how the student uses that language and how the student builds and connects everything in that document. This is useful. It's very helpful. Do not neglect reading this and paying close attention to it, and it will guide you, and it'll be very helpful to you at the end. Is that clear for everyone? Did everyone get that? Kind of, just come give me a thumbs up, show me something. Is everyone in possession of the document at this point? Okay, very good, very good. The next thing I want to reiterate is you need to be connecting with your mentor teacher. If you haven't done that to inform this individual and let them know what you are doing, and those of you who are not placed yet, I can't speak to that, but those of you who are placed, who have a mentor teacher, that individual is the link between you and the assessment. Let them help you, go to them for support, ask them questions, share information, let them know what you're thinking, and they will guide you successfully through this process. When you do your videos, really depend on them to film for you. I highly recommend that you get someone to help you with your filming. It's one thing to kind of place a camera and then think you can roam around the classroom. And then when you go to look at it, you find out that you have not gained enough or grabbed enough useful data where you can pull out these 5-minute videos. So pay close attention to getting someone to film for you and to help you out with that process. And then another thing I want to toss into this mix, one student was telling me that what he is thinking about doing is making these short 5-minute videos, and then making another 5-minute video, and then another 5-minute video. You know what? At the end of the day, you can do what you want. However, I highly recommend that you do a whole filming of a lesson. Pay close attention to what you need to show in a 5-minute video, and then pull from that large video the pockets of videos that you need. Does that make sense to everyone? Okay. The next thing, just a little business here. I sent out a notice informing you that we'd like to consider November 18th for the date that we'll be submitting cycle 1 to CTC. You know, we looked over, we discussed, and we felt that that was the best possible date. With that date, it gives you the entire month of October to do step 1, 2, 3, and 4. And then we're not going to even count the first 2 weeks in November. So you have about if you start right now looking at what's left in September, the whole month of October, and then 2 additional weeks in November, and then the 18th, looking at a date where you shove your completed cycle 1, steps 1, 2, 3, and 4 into the CTC window for grading. All right. That means that you are going to have to make this a priority. You are getting all these tools. I've given you an example cycle 1 to look over. You have this little tutorial, and I'll also throw in the mix. I am more than willing to meet with maybe 8 or 9 people together on a Zoom on a Saturday or a Sunday to go over something very specific if you need something very specific in order to help you through this process. But with this much support and this much tools, I don't see why we can't get this in our way and out of our way. All right. Okay. The next thing is, let's talk a little bit about your focus students. How many of you have started the process of thinking about those 3 focus students that you're going to be using for the assessment? How is that process going?
For me, it's going really well. I've identified all 3 students, and
Okay.
I'm working with 1 student right now as we try to engage her more in mathematics. The class that I selected to do my CalTPA, they gave us 3 extra special ed students. So it's getting a little bit hard to just pick to select just him because everybody needs our help. So that's going to be a little bit challenging for me.
Okay, you say challenging in the fact that you don't know which students you're going to pick, or challenging?
Challenging as getting my focus on not giving him just a special attention just to him, but giving my attention to everybody.
Okay, okay. So so you're going to have to make that work, because you've got to show engagement with each of those 3 students. Okay, well, good. You've got a lot of the journey taken care of. Brother Zachary, talk to me.
Hey, did that fix it? Okay. Yeah. So what we did is me and my math teacher collectively found 3 focus students. We have 1 ELL student reclassified. We have 1 student who is IEP, and then another student who, and I'm not sure if this qualifies for that 3rd focus student, but she suffers from severe anxiety from the quarantine.
Absolutely, that's definitely a student that fits the criteria. Very good.
Perfect. Cool. Yeah. So and we've just been focusing on developing a lesson plan. We're still not very far in that process, but we're working on it. She's been out with COVID actually, so it's been hard.
Okay, cool. That's very good. Nice hearing your voice, Zachary.
Thank you.
Carlito, how are you? Carlito, how are you? Carlos Ruiz?
I'm good.
Hey.
So in my case, or at least, I mean, what I found really surprising is that for the teacher that I'm currently, or at least 1 of the teachers that I'm observing, they have a total of anything like around 15 students who are English learners. I think 2 of them have a 504, and then 8 of them are special ed. So for that one, I like what that actually surprised me, because I didn't really expect it to be that many students. But my concern would be, if anything is trying to, like, I would say meet, like, try to write about at least choose which focus student without having the other students feel excluded. I was like, oh, how come, he's trying, how come, he's asking this specific student about this with like this, like, about, like, or I don't know, like, for me, it's just that concern is, like, I don't want the students to feel excluded when it comes to,
Okay,
well, at least.
well, here's the thing, Carlos. It's not a matter of the students feeling excluded. It's a matter of you responding to the prompts that CTC asks you to respond to for these 3 students, okay? You have to really keep that in mind. You have a described task in front of you, and you have to meet those requirements for CTC, okay? So keep that in mind. Let that be your focus. Do you understand me? All right, very good. Listen, and thank you for your voice, Carlos. I see my man Dylan is here. Dylan, give me a thumbs up because I can't seem to text to you. And I'm gonna take 3 or 4 more hands up, and then I'm gonna turn you over to this wonderful friend of mine, student Dylan, and he is gonna give you a firsthand on the ground rundown on how this thing should look. So let's talk to Megan real fast. How are you, Megan? It's nice to see you. Megan? Okay, so I see the other hands kind of went down, and I didn't want, Megan, can you speak? Okay, Dylan.
I still have a, oh, sorry.
Okay.
Professor Robinson, this is Dorothy Morris. I still had one quick question.
Very good. Nice to hear your voice, Dorothy. Talk to me.
Hey, yeah, thanks. I have my focus student for English learner and an IEP student. I had picked a student who was just very quiet, and we found out that she was homeless. And I thought that would be my focus student number 3. But I thought she didn't have an IEP yet, but she does have an IEP. So my question is, does the focus student number 3 basically have to be a non-IEP student, or?
You have to have one student with the IEP, and the other ones really shouldn't have an IEP. I mean, you know, okay. Does that answer your question?
Sort of. And then my follow-up question is, could I also, for my focus student number 3, pick a student who is advanced, who were basically modifying our lesson to challenge him more?
If you do, you need to indicate that very clearly. You need to make that clear for the reader of your exam, for the CTC people. If you decide to take that step, make it very clear that they understand that that's what you're doing and that's what you have done. Don't just do it off the cuff and not make it clear to the CTC, the reader of your assessment, okay?
Yes, okay.
All right.
But in general, it would be okay.
It would, if you decide to do it, you must inform the reader. Let them know exactly what you've done so that they don't have to guess or question or wonder what you're doing. Because if they have to wonder or guess, it could be a part of losing points or not gaining points. So just make it clear and lay it out to them what you're doing. Do you understand that one?
Yeah, yes.
Okay, very nice to hear your voice, Dorothy.
Thanks.
What I'm gonna do, folks, I didn't wanna suck up all the gas this time. I'm gonna turn you over to my man, Dylan. And what he's going to do is he's going to enlighten you and really make things very clear. We will take questions, but if I find the questions are gonna throw us way off, I'm gonna reel us back in and then shoot it back over to Dylan, okay? So he's our guest speaker for today. Brother Dylan, take it away.
Hey guys, can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay. My name is Dylan Bloxham. I'm in the 2nd semester of the student teaching program. So I'm currently placed at Sunny Hills High School in Fullerton. I teach US history and world history. I remember only a few months ago when I was in your guys' shoes and I was doing Cycle 1. I remember being really nervous, kind of questioning what this test was. And I understand that anxiety that you guys are going through right now. So, So what I wanted to do today was kind of wanted to leave it up to you guys. I have all my documents from Cycle 1, and additionally, I have my scoring template from Cycle 1. So I was wondering, would you guys want to go through the documents? Do you want to ask me general questions, or what structure would you guys like? If you could type into the chat, do you mainly want me to answer questions, or do you want me to go through my templates and show those to you guys? What would you prefer? What would be more beneficial?
If I could interject, I would say maybe sharing the templates. That way we just know maybe some ideas of like how we do our assignment for when we actually teach the class on the video?
All right, we'll do that. Dr. Robinson, could you make me co-host, please? So
I think I did.
Okay.
You should be I'll do it again.
All right.
Okay, you're co-host, brother.
Okay. One thing I would recommend for you guys that don't have placements yet, depending on what your subject is, I would go through the state standards because you guys are in the first semester, and I looked through probably the first 5 standards. And if you're not placed yet, I would start making or come up with ideas for mini lessons for each topic. So then when you get your placement, at least you can have an idea. If you get placed in mid-October, then you have an outline of, let's say I want to do a lesson off of Content Standard 3 for US history, which would be the Americanization movement. So I would start, if you don't have a placement yet, I would start first outlining different lesson topics that you can cover, because you only have to teach one lesson for cycle 1. All right, so the first thing you guys want to look at for cycle 1 is this template right here, the getting to know students. So let me close that real quick. So for cycle 1, you guys are going to have to obviously choose a class that you're going to teach. The topic that I chose was I actually taught about Pearl Harbor, and I created a thematic theme, which was about fascism and totalitarianism. So what you're trying to do is you're trying to connect the prior knowledge that your students have. What they want to see with prior knowledge is that you're forming connections across your lesson. So for instance, when I'm teaching about Pearl Harbor here, I used the prior knowledge and I talked about how my students had just finished a lesson or a unit on fascism and totalitarianism. So when you're writing this first section on the template of getting to know students, connect their prior knowledge, talk about what they're learning, and form that connection between what they learned and what they're going to learn from you. You want to show kind of a bridge of knowledge, in essence, a continuation of it. Okay, so for the prior academic knowledge on this first template, talk about what they've learned, and then talk about how you're going to take that prior knowledge and expand upon it in your lesson. That's where the Bloom's taxonomy comes in. You want to say that they have the knowledge to synthesize an opinion on this subject. Well, I'm going to give them the skills to create an opinion or a formulation of an idea on this next topic. Does that make sense? Okay, so that's what you want to do. You want to connect to their prior knowledge. When you get to their proficiency levels, this is really easy. Go on Aries, you're going to look at their LPAC. The LPAC is the English Language Learners Test. There's 4 different categories that can go on there. Get the LPAC scores of the class. With their proficiency levels, talk about academic language. That's one thing that the test observers really want to see is academic language connections. So talk about vocabulary. An easy way to do this for one clip is to include a vocabulary preview on your slides. Give a definition, maybe a fill in the blank. Talk about vocabulary, for instance. So that's what you want with their proficiency levels. Okay. Talk about for their cultural and linguistic resources and funds of knowledge, just talk about what they know, talk about the school, talk about their life experiences, get to know your students a little bit more, maybe talk about the sports they're in. This is really just for the observer to see that you know who your students are and that you give a crap about your students. Okay, that's the first thing they want to see. They want to see that you're actually engaging with your students. Prior experiences, this once again connects to what they're talking about, what you did before. So it could be the previous unit, the previous lesson, the previous week. You're just talking about what you're doing. You want to hit a little bit in this section on the first template about what skills you're going to do. So if you look here, one important word that I included was scaffolding. So you want to talk about how maybe you use primary sources, for instance, in the previous unit. Well, I'm going to use primary sources as my current lesson because I've scaffolded previously how to look at primary sources. So show them that you're taking skills you already taught them and you're applying it in this lesson. Does that make sense? Okay. The rest of this is just kind of information you've seen, resources that you have in the classroom. For the first focus student, obviously you're looking for someone that has is an English learner or a standard English learner. The difference between an English learner and a standard English learner, the standard English learner is someone who's been reclassified. So someone who's maybe been in the country for 4 or 5 years, according to their LPAC scores, they're 3 or 4. So find someone that fits that. You want to talk a lot about their academic development. Academic language is huge. So vocabulary terms, the idea of analyzing and synthesizing opinions, especially the higher level of Bloom's taxonomy. That's what you want to aim for there. Social identity, that's just what your students like. You're going to talk about the resources, experiences. That's pretty self-explanatory. When you get to focus student 2, this is someone who has an IEP. Okay, the student that I did mine on had ADHD. This is where you really want to hit right here on their accommodations. So what are you doing? What do you include in your lesson that allows them to feel comfortable? Okay, for this student, I gave them additional time. So you give them additional time. Talk about their seating arrangement. Okay, talk about how you set up your Google Classroom, the policies that you have, how you communicate with them. You want to talk about how you accommodate them and help them thrive in learning. You don't want to negatively impact your student. So you don't want to say, oh, the student just gets more time because he has, disorder X or Y. You want to talk about the skills that they have. Say this student is a great writer. So when I'm talking about them, I do writing activities. You want to show that you can give them accommodation that plays on their strengths. You don't want to make your students look weak. Never write in the templates anything negative about your students. That's the worst thing you can do. Obviously talk about their identity. This stuff's kind of more just background information on them. Okay. And then when you get to your third student, this is just someone who has a life experience outside of school. I would talk about here accommodations, not in the fact that they're learning, but how you connect with that student. Maybe mention how you talk to them. Check out how they're doing. Make sure that the person who's grading here understands that you can connect to your students. Show that you care about them more than just beyond teaching them subject matter. You want to show in this section that you're a caring individual. Does that make sense? And then you're going to talk about their prior academic knowledge. That stuff kind of gets a little bit repetitive, especially here with the student that suffers from anxiety or whatever it may be, the social identity. Talk about their attitude in class, how they are, and then talk about how you get involved and you talk to them and try to change that. What they want to see in this section is progression, how you're going forward with this student. Does that make sense? Yeah. All right. So that's the first one. Any questions about that template? Oh,
How about Carlos and then Kyle?
What are your questions?
So if anything, brother, my main question is, we're supposed to use this template and submit it on the CalTPA? That's we can submit this template?
Yeah. So what you're going to do
Okay.
is you're going to take this template directly. Easiest to do, Microsoft, convert it into a PDF. You won't have any problems.
Okay.
You're directly going to take templates from the CTC and write on them. Kyle?
Okay. I think.
Oh, yes. Hello there, Dylan. Thank you for this. So this is the first 9 pages, and the idea essentially is to touch all the points with the CalTPA and possibly TPEs, and then how they basically apply to your 3 targeted students.
So
That's the idea behind this.
What you're doing with this first template is you're showing and providing background information on your students more than anything. And you're talking about how your lesson provides accommodations and how the prior knowledge and experience that they have in your class can be applied to these 3 specific students in your lesson.
Yeah, you're just, Kyle, you're setting the stage for with this template here. You're setting the stage.
Yeah.
All right. Very good.
And
Brendan?
Yeah, I actually wanted to ask, and concerning your focus students, it's like some of the stuff here does seem a bit personal. Like, how are you able to contact them, or like, does the mentor teacher sometimes help you in identifying which students might be useful for your focus student study?
well,
And like, how do you go about communicating with them so that it's not like inappropriate or like, professional? And
yeah, the 2 ways you're really going to find out information is first off Aries. Aries is going to contain the kid has a 504 and an IEP. That information will be available to you on your class roster in Aries. Number 2, your mentor teacher, especially too, as you guys get placed, your mentor teacher knows these students more than you. In essence, you're kind of taking the experiences that your mentor teacher has and kind of building on that. So you ask your mentor teacher, and then you can also find additional resources in Aries about specific 504s and IEPs.
all right, that's very useful. Thank you.
Very good.
All right, can I move on to the next template? Okay.
Sorry, can I ask a question real quick?
Yes.
So I'm wondering about, I think it's the first focus student.
Mhm.
Like if you choose a student who speaks a language that you don't speak, how do you communicate with them and like support them? And especially for this process of writing about them, like how would you do that?
Well, the way that I would recommend you do it is, depending on what language they speak, try to develop, let's say you make a worksheet, okay? Google Translate that worksheet into their primary language. And then what you can do is you can give them additional time. You want to show that they're understanding the content. They can write about it or speak about it in their standard language, and then you can convert that back to English. That will provide you with the data, a written hard copy from that worksheet, for instance, about how they're basically synthesizing information. So that's one way that you can get data. The other way is that you can try to maybe partner them with a student who speaks that same language. Therefore, they can act as, for lack of a better term, sort of a translator.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Let's go with Nicholas, and then you keep moving forward, Dylan.
Okay.
Well, I just had a quick question about when you were gathering information about the whole class, and then especially about your focus students. Was your method about gathering information with Aries and talking with your mentor teacher, or did you talk directly to students also?
I used Aries, then talked to my mentor teacher, and then at the time when I was doing this, I was still on Zoom. So the 3 specific students that I knew, I began individually, privately messaging on Zoom each day so I can get a form a closer connection to them. And then they opened up to me a little bit.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Very good.
Right.
Okay.
All right. Next up, the next step you guys are going to have is your lesson plan template. Okay. So for your lesson plan, the top of this is pretty specific. You're going to talk about the title of your lesson, obviously your subject, etc. You're going to go through your framework, get the exact California content standard. There's a PDF you can Google. And then also, I think what they're looking for more than anything is the ELD standards in particular. I would recommend you try to aim for at least 3 ELD standards. So here I have collaborate, interpretive, and productive. You're not going to hit all the 3 of these, for example, in specific detail, but you can pull out little pieces. So like this one right here, precise vocabulary, you can pull that out in your vocabulary preview. If you have one slide where you talk about vocabulary. The oral collaboration discussion. This can just be a brief 1-minute discussion in one of your clips, okay? Close literary and informative text. You can include just a primary source quote or a quote from a leader. You don't have to have a whole lesson on each of these. Hit little tiny aspects of them, if that makes sense, okay? Your learning goals are going to be very important. You should have 2 different goals. You should have a content objective and learning or a language objective. So your content objective is what you want them to know, okay? So for Pearl Harbor, I said key leaders and battles, okay? Additionally, I want students to evaluate and formulate an opinion. So this is that Bloom's taxonomy. That's that higher level. Evaluate and formulate. This is something as simple as the students just come up with their own opinion, okay, after a classroom discussion. That's higher order thinking. They take your information, create an opinion about it. Simple as that. Language objective can be something where you maybe have them write out. I use guided notes. So I had guided questions that went along with my lecture where students were writing out their answers. Okay, that could be something simple. Language objective, they're just using that vocabulary you gave them. They're using a quote or they're using commentary from a leader, something like that. These 2 make them intertwined. Okay, the big thing about the CalTPA, they understand that you're a beginning teacher. You don't need to be Mozart. Keep it simple. Okay. Next up, then you're going to have the content in your lesson. Okay, so once again, this is from your students' assets. So taking what your students have, they're basically their prior knowledge, what do you expect them to learn? All you're going to write about is I expect them to be able to have an opinion or be able to look at primary sources. Whatever your goal is from your lesson is what you have. Okay, this is where you write your misunderstandings or misconceptions. So anything that might be confusing. So maybe this topic might be confusing because they've learned something similar. Might be a little bit confusing because they're not, you know, as far along in high school, but don't write anything negative, okay? Don't write anything negative. If you have something negative to say, phrase it in a way that sounds positive. I know that sounds like an oxymoron, but that's what you need to do, okay? So what knowledge and skills do they have? Higher order thinking and academic vocabulary development, okay? So using new vocabulary words and higher order thinking, formulating and developing opinions. That's one big thing you can do, okay? Assessment can be pretty easy, okay? Assessment can just be informal. It can be asking a question, classroom discussion. Also, maybe have some formative and a summative assessment. So your formative assessment is progress monitoring. So a brief discussion, maybe having them answer questions, something like that. The summative assessment needs to come at the end of your lesson. The summative assessment is what you've learned in the totality. So that's where you can have them answer an essential question, a bigger question. That's where you can have a longer classroom discussion. So let's say I had my lesson on Pearl Harbor. My big essential question is, why did they do this? Your last clip can be a student saying, well, the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor because of Roosevelt's decision for an oil embargo. Okay, what they're doing is they're taking the information I gave them, they're thinking, they're developing, they're analyzing, okay? They're creating something. You want your students to create an opinion, create an idea, create an expression. You want them to create something, okay? So you have your check for understanding. How will your students demonstrate this? This can be their guided notes, it can be the classroom discussion, whatever they're producing from the lesson. How will you check for understanding? Okay, monitoring progress, that can be a halfway discussion. The summative assessment can be your final discussion, your guided notes, your essay, something like that. Something that takes away. It can be something like an exit ticket. Okay? How are you going to structure the lesson? Okay, so visual media, slideshows are great. Okay? Slideshows, gallery walk. Use something. Don't make it really complicated. Use a PowerPoint, okay? Include images, include resources. Also, you want to include ways that you can help other learners, so visual learners, video clips, images. For your English language learners, maybe more discussion-based. Include a modality or multiple ways that people can learn and access your lesson, more than just straight lecture. Image analysis, so images, quotes, discussion, things like that, okay? So how are you going to manage student learning? Well, you place students in groups that make sense, you walk around, check students out, things like that, okay? And then this comes in, how are you going to engage students in higher order thinking? Discussion. So have them create something. That's the higher order thinking. Creating an idea, an opinion, a piece of work. That's what it is. Synthesizing information, creating something. Okay? And then just your multiple modalities. This is your accommodation, images, additional time, placement, things like that. Okay. And then the rest of this is your adaptations. So your English learners, additional time, additional resources. IEP, additional time, additional resources, outside help, grouping with people who will help them, placing them near the front of the class, things like that. Your MT will help you out a lot with accommodations. So that's the end of that template. So what questions do you guys have? So Kyle.
Let's start with Everett.
Yeah, brother. So this is just for social sciences. So when you were actually looking at the state content standard, did you use the framework or did you use the actual 98 content standards?
I use the actual content standards.
The 98 one?
Yeah.
1998?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks, Everett. Let's go. I'm going to go with Diego, and then I'm going to go with Kyle and Brendan. Diego?
Thank you. Thank you. I just wanted to clarify. So for our lesson, we're doing it with one class period, and the 3 focus students have to be in the same class period.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay. Just want to clarify. Thank you.
Yeah. Brendan and then Kyle. Okay, let's go with Hector and then Kyle.
Oh,
Okay, let's go with Kyle. Kyle, let's go.
Yes. So my question for this is, if they're like, I'm sorry if I missed it, is there like a certain number of words or a word count for when doing all this, or are you just generally trying to answer those specific targets?
All right. Depending on the template at the bottom right, it will give you a page limit.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, got it.
Yeah, that'll all be laid out, the 9 pages, and you just need to keep it at 9 pages and not go over a page. Hector?
Yeah, my question is something similar along those lines. Did you ever feel like you had to hit the 9-page limit, or did you go under it?
You know, my recommendation, I write a lot. Oftentimes people tell me that I don't shut the hell up. But what I would recommend more than anything is quality over quantity. So if you can answer in a paragraph versus 3 paragraphs, probably try to go for the quality answer. Don't just try to write a bunch of stuff, because if you write too much, the person grading it might get a little confused, or they might lose what the main idea is. So as bland as that is, I would go quality over quantity in terms of how much you write.
Thank you very much.
Cassie?
Hi, I just have a question real quick. So not about this, but I'm trying to take like notes while you're talking. Could you be able to slow down just a little bit so that I could like get down all my notes? Okay, thank you so much. Sorry about that.
Yeah, sorry about that.
And then I'm going to butcher your name, Sheena.
Hi, Shania. It's okay though. I was wondering, so a lot of the prompts, like, I feel like they have like a nuance difference. So like one of the ones that comes to mind is like the one, how will you manage students, and the one right after it that I couldn't like quite get at the same time. How do you differentiate when like some of the terminology or like some of the wording is very similar? Like what did you do to kind of find clarity in those questions?
Yeah, that's a big thing. A lot of the CalTPA is very repetitive. So when you're looking at the vocabulary, you're probably going to write the exact same thing you did for the previous answer, but just phrase it a little bit differently. Just kind of take whatever phrasing that they have in that question and apply it to whatever your answer may be. It might be the same thing, but just kind of take that specific language that they're using and kind of tailor your answer towards that language, if that makes sense.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Carlos, is your hand up again? Yes or no?
Yes, it is.
Okay,
Um,
speak.
okay, so for the example that you provided on how to rephrase something negative and turn into a positive, can you give me another example? Because I was confused with the example you provided earlier.
Yeah.
Like when it
Okay. So let's say you have a student who has a socio-emotional disorder. Okay. Anxiety, depression. What you can say is that that student, because of their condition, instead of saying that they're not involved or not participating in class, you can say because of getting to know them, they've spoken up more and they provide a valuable voice, which is a welcomed addition to my class. So you can take negative, something that they don't speak, say when they do speak, it's an opportunity for them to give us another voice or another perspective in the class.
Okay.
Okay.
Very good.
Thank you.
All right. All right, let's keep moving forward. I think these other hands are just up by proxy, right?
Well, actually, I had one question just on the ELD standards.
Okay.
Yeah, like, so how are you able to cite them? Like, do you just cite them by how you did it, or like, did you have to write the CCSS like code or?
Directly copy and paste it from the Common Core website.
Okay.
All right. All right.
Okay. So next up, what we have, your third template and last of step one is your rationale for explaining why you do things. Okay. So once you've done your lesson plan template, excuse me, then you're going to have to explain why you chose what you did. So first step for prior academic knowledge. So you need to explain how the prior academic knowledge relates to the learning goal for this lesson. Okay. So whatever you may be doing, talk about how leading up. So when I was talking about my lesson was on Pearl Harbor, I talked about how my students had an idea from the previous unit about what fascism is and what totalitarianism is. So they take that prior knowledge and they apply it to a regime in Japan, and that helps explain to them the actions and motives going into Pearl Harbor. And therefore that prior knowledge helps me to today's lesson because they understand how the Japanese mentality was, therefore they can kind of apply that framework to Pearl Harbor. Okay? So basically you're going to talk about the prior unit they were doing. Maybe talk about some of the vocabulary they had as well. Then you get to their student assets and their learning needs. So this is kind of where you start talking about the different backgrounds that your students have. So maybe their cultural or linguistic backgrounds. For instance, I talked about how in my class I had several students of Asian descent and how Asians, for example, come from a communal-based society versus a Western individual-based society. And so I talked about how this asset provides me in our discussions a different perspective. So talk about maybe the cultural experiences of your students, how that provides a different perspective in discussions and things like that, okay? Also, you can talk about their linguistic or their socioeconomic resources. Once again, make sure that there's nothing negative, make sure it's all positive. So you can talk about how you built your lesson around the interests of your students. Say, a bunch of my students have great ability to write, they're great writers, so I decided to use a primary source analysis to showcase their strengths. So you want to show why you constructed your lesson, what you did around their assets, okay? So your student learning activity, here you're going to explain why or how what you did goes into higher order thinking. So you're going to say, I chose this, for example, because it will allow my students, like I used a primary source quote from Douglas MacArthur. I used this because it gave them an example to develop something. They can pick apart this quote, talk in their groups, and develop a higher order opinion. So you're explaining how your lesson and higher order thinking correlate with one another. So for example, if you use groups, if you used a demonstration, why you use what you used. Okay. Instructional strategies, this is where you talk about basically the structure of your lesson. So I use group discussions and guided notes to scaffold. So you'll talk about what methods you use. I use discussion because of X. I used a pair share because of X. You'll explain why you use that. Okay. And then student grouping is pretty self-explanatory. I would just say I group students based off their interests. If you have primary language learners, okay, or ELs, I group them with someone who will help them. With my students who are of, special needs backgrounds, I group them with someone who will be friendly to them, etc. Talking basically about your grouping. Okay. Academic language development, this is using vocabulary. So how does your lesson increase their vocabulary? You can do a vocabulary preview, talk about how they have to use that vocabulary within their discussion or within the work, okay? So you're gonna use new vocabulary terms. Students learned it in the beginning of the lesson, and they applied it by the end of the lesson. That's an example of academic language development. So they're using the ideas you taught them in the class. Resources, materials, this is just lecture slides, images, Chromebooks, things that they used, technology that you use in your lessons. You do a gallery walk, you can cite the images that you used. This is just the resources. Okay. Assessment, you're going to write down your formative and your summative assessment. So talk about why you used formative assessment. I used the discussion as my formative assessment because it allowed me to understand what my students were processing. By asking a specific question, you can see if they were getting the knowledge right. And you can talk about how if they weren't getting the knowledge in the moment, you retaught or you relearned. So you're changing your strategies. Then your summative assessment, you can talk about why you use guided notes, why you use an exit ticket. This shows me what they learned and what I need to reteach. And then this last part, development considerations. So talk about what your class is like as a whole. Okay, are they mature, immature? Do they represent typical adolescence or are they in atypical times? Okay, talk about how your lesson framework maybe helps guide their logic. I had freshmen that I did this with. Okay, so I used the guided notes as a framework to help guide their logic. These questions help provide them a framework. They don't have those cognitive skills yet to think on their own. So they need a guided framework, a series of questions to guide their logic, okay? And then you're just gonna talk about your 3 specific focus students. For your English learner, focus a lot on the academic language, okay? For your IEP, talk about how maybe you didn't want to use anything triggering, how you provided accommodations for time, maybe a separate breakout room, maybe you talk to them, something like that. And then focus student 3, talk about how you were able to, maybe like me, for example, I had a student who had stress and anxiety. I tried to tailor the lesson where it didn't have a test or a quiz. So maybe talk about how your lesson is just trying to make a relaxed environment. Okay, so what questions do you guys have about that template?
Let's go, Nina.
Yes, hi. I think my main question right now is what type of language we use. So for example, in more academic writing, we should never use I. Can this be personalized? Like we say, I plan to teach, or should this be more academic as in for this lesson, this will be used?
When it comes to templates, yeah, use I, of course.
Yes, definitely.
Language development is that your kids, okay, you have social and you have academic language development. Academic language development occurs in the classroom. It's very small. That's why it's much more important, especially for your English learners, to be focused on that academic language development, because the amount of time they spend with academic language is about 10-15% of their time, or 85% of the time they're outside the classroom. That's with their friends, sports, talking about learning slang. What you want to show is the academic language in the classroom. So that's vocabulary, analysis skills, things like that. That's what you want to show. So vocabulary development and analysis skills. So if you're working with a primary source, maybe break down some of the phrasing, break down words, show the meaning behind those words, and then let the students use those words in their discussion or in their summative assessment.
Okay. Sheena, is your hand up again or no? Eric's?
Yeah, hi. So I just got placed this past week. The whole time I was expecting to be placed at a high school. However, ended up getting placed at a middle school. And I've noticed that like when my master's teacher speaks like in too much of an academic language or like, advanced, academic language, my students tend to tune out or get distracted. And when she starts talking to them like kind of like informally or socially, then that's when they start paying attention. So what do you recommend I do then?
Well, okay. There's one thing when you're coming to the classroom, okay? When you come in the classroom, especially in your first semester, your interactions and your thinking is like that of a college student, okay? You can walk into a college class and expect them to have a ton of prior knowledge. Your kids don't have that. So what I would do is maybe what your MT does doesn't work. You don't have to do what your MT does, okay? What I would do if I were you is you don't have to talk you can use slang, you can use that, but you want your students' responses to feature vocabulary. Right. So maybe either do a preview, like an academic vocabulary preview where you go over the definitions, or do some type of worksheet, matching activity, it would be some type of interactive activity online with the vocab, flashcard potentially like cram.com. So you can diversify your teaching strategy, but just make sure that the students the vocabulary usage is obvious. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I make it obvious by like, you know, detailing my activities and like my scaffolding techniques.
Yeah. So you want to show in your clips, you want to show in your lesson plan that there's vocabulary in there. So include like an activity, like vocabulary preview, maybe flashcards, something like that. And
Okay. And, sorry. What was I gonna say? And you have to show the vocabulary in the videos. Is that part of like the aspect of one of the aspects of the videos that we have to?
Yeah, I included it in one of my videos.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Next up, I'm going to show you is we gone over all the templates and stuff. I'm going to show you the 2 activities that I used. Let me see where I have. Okay, so this is the PowerPoint that I used. Okay, I just made off Google Slides. So the first thing you want to make very obvious is your learning objective. So literally put it on the slides. If you're teaching in class, write the learning objective on the board. Write the content standard on the board. Make it obvious. You know, make the TPA as simple as you can. Okay, you don't have to make it all like alliterative and figurative and like they're having to try to discover the meaning. No, make it obvious. Write stuff on the board. Okay, this is the vocabulary preview right here. So in one of my videos, I had the students read the term. Okay, and they were able to. Sorry, I'm getting a phone call. Okay, they were able to read the term, and then I highlighted them in red. This is an example of how you can show that academic development. Because if you're looking on the later slides, that vocabulary word's in red. That helps show your students that's important. And the test examiner is going to realize, like, oh, there's that academic language development. It's continuing to follow up. This is the first kind of assessment I did, discussion live chat. This is also progress monitoring. You can feature questions like this, just multiple choice. This was a YouTube video. So that's once again another medium that you can include as an accommodation. Once again, highlighting the red vocabulary. Okay, here's another assessment. I included maps. Okay, include visuals. All right. So keep the notes pretty simple. Okay. Then on your concluding summary, okay, one of your clips, you need to show the next steps of learning. Literally tell them what's next. Okay. We're doing Pearl Harbor today, and tomorrow we're doing Roosevelt's address. Literally tell them what we learned today. Roosevelt, in response, will have the address on Pearl Harbor, December 7th, 1941, blah, blah, blah. Keep it simple. Literally write, next time we will be learning about this. Just keep it simple. Write content standards on the slides, on the board. Tell them directly. Don't try to make it a mystery. Don't think you're all smart because it's up for interpretation. Make it obvious. So that's kind of what you have there, okay? So you have that, and then this is what I used for my summative assessment, these guided notes, okay? So this served as formative assessment in the fact that it's pretty simple. Students describe what they do. And at the very bottom, so all this builds up. We see all this academic language development. They have these activities where they're formulating an opinion. They're looking at resources. They're looking at quotes. And then this is the summative assessment. It's just a simple paragraph, okay? So they're taking what you have a question, ask them to cite evidence, and they're developing an opinion. That's it. So you can do guided notes, you can do whatever. Just show during your lesson that you have a little bit of formative assessment, progress monitoring, and then your summative assessment at the end. It could be a discussion, an exit ticket, a quick write, something like that. Okay. Nina, you can go first. What's your question?
So do we tell the students, so we include the standards. I wouldn't have known to include them in our handout or whatever applies to our subject. Do we tell the students about them, or I don't think they know about?
Yeah, what I would do is just when you introduce yourself, say, hey class, today our learning objective is blah, blah, blah. We're also going to be trying doing blah, blah, blah. Okay, literally keep it as simple as you can. Like, don't make it like there's interpretation for testing service. Because these people who are grading your tests have probably looked at a million examples and gotten frustrated by people who try to leave it up for interpretation. Okay, your audience is a school teacher. School teachers understand that working with 14-year-olds, working with 15-year-olds can be difficult. Keeping it simple is easier for the students. Keeping it simple is easier for you. So expressly write out your learning goals. Expressly write out what you're doing next. Just make it very obvious and clear what you're doing. Yeah. Eric, what's your question?
I think his hand is just up from last time.
All right. Yeah.
Hey, can we take a look at your video clip?
Yeah, I can try to play them. It might be a little bit. Which one would you guys want? 1, 2, or 3?
Just anyone you want.
Okay, let's try clip 1. This was when I was on Zoom, so it was a little bit weird. But let's see if you guys can. Hold on. Oh, one important thing. You need students talking in your clips. Okay, you have to have students talking. Okay, you will get an automatic failure if you don't have at least a certain number of students in your clips. Okay, so make sure you have students talking and visible in your clips. We'll do clip 2. I think that's probably the easier one. Because it's considered
Yeah, this is not working too well, huh?
Yeah, it might be a little hard to see, but yeah. So should I just skip the clips and go to the annotations?
Yeah.
So once you guys film, you're gonna next have your annotations. So when you upload your stuff to CTC, your clip, you're gonna have to add annotations to it. Your annotations have certain titles, like creating a warm environment, explaining prior knowledge. So whatever you'll do is you'll annotate. So you'll select a section of your clip, let's say 10 seconds or 20 seconds. And you're gonna write out the time code, so from 00 to 52 seconds, for instance, how you created a positive environment. So literally write out, I established a positive environment by welcoming students to class, by making eye contact, giving affirmation, things like that. Keep your annotations pretty simple. The annotations are you kind of like fleshing out what you did. Most of what you did should be visible in the clips, but your annotations provide that little like a little bit more of a refresher. So the annotations, don't be dependent on the annotations to explain everything. Because if your clips suck, the annotations aren't going to save you. You got to have good clips, but the annotations can help you explain things a little bit more. Maybe what you did was a little bit subtle and the observer wouldn't understand something that's subtle. Well, that's where the annotations come in. They help you explain that a little bit more. Does that make sense? So you're gonna have to use at least one annotation title probably per video. You can have as many as you want. I would recommend probably shoot for like 4 or 5 annotations per video. I think the total I had between my 3 clips was like 20, something like that. They're all right here. So, you know, it's dependent on what you want, but keep them pretty simple. You only have 1,000 characters to type. That's like 3 tweets, okay? So that's the annotations right there. You guys have any questions about the annotations? I would just keep them simple.
Yes. Could we see the whole sentences just because I could only see
Let me see. I gotta
examples. Thank you.
I might need to stop the sharing for 1 second. Give me 1 second. Let me stop sharing. Let's see. Here we go. Okay. Sorry, 1 second. Can you guys see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. So here's, for instance, one example. Let's take the very first one. Okay, so clip 1, so the opening of the lesson. All right, you'll put your time code, start, end time. Okay. You'll put your annotation title. For example, this annotation title is creating a positive and safe learning environment. So what you're going to do here in your actual kind of thing is you're going to flush it out a little bit more. So for instance, I established a positive learning environment. So make it obvious. What are you doing here? I'm establishing a positive learning environment by greeting each student with a good morning as I'm doing roll call. This acknowledges to each student that I recognize that they're here. Several students entered the class late, but I allow students to speak during class so they can let me know that they are here during roll call. After completing roll call, I tell the students that it's great to see them. This establishes a positive and safe learning environment as the students know that they can speak up if needed and this shows that I'm eager to teach them. Okay.
And this is actually happening in your video, correct? And you're just sort of bringing it out more with the annotation.
So you're explaining in a little bit more detail why you're doing this thing. So in my video, you can see that I'm greeting students like, you know, good morning, Dr. Robinson. Then in my annotation, I'll put why I did that. So I can publish that I'm eager for them to be in class. I'm excited to teach them, things like that. So your annotations are basically you kind of flushing out in a little bit greater detail what you're doing.
Hey, why don't you, before you shut that down, why don't you read another one? I think that was pretty good. Just kind of, just very helpful.
All right, so let's say we go to, let's go to the middle of the lesson here, okay? Let's go to this one right here. So we're in clip 2, the time code beginning end. So this title is engaging students in content-specific higher order thinking. So this is where we're using Bloom's taxonomy specifically. So I put here, I use the Zoom chat to allow students to express their opinions throughout the lesson. This particular student used the Zoom chat because she is shy. Okay? Higher order thinking displayed here as the student builds upon the thoughts of another. She capitalizes on the word terror to build her own thoughts. She is synthesizing the content from the lesson and the views of another student to create an original thought or opinion. Okay, so this is higher order thinking because we had talked about this vocabulary word earlier. Now the student is using the ideas from the lesson or from the ideas of another classmate to build her own opinion. So this is what you're doing here. If you have in your clip a student talking about something, saying their opinion, you can talk about in your annotation how this came to be. You can explain a little bit more what the student is doing. So this is you kind of flushing out what they're talking about. Does that make sense?
Yes. How about one more in the last category, monitoring?
Okay. So let's say we're on clip 3, monitoring for student understanding and next steps for learning. Okay. So I put here, I monitor for student understanding through the summative assessment my guided notes, which is the concluding summary. I preview the next steps of learning by talking about the next unit. I connect the theme of dehumanization in today's lecture with the next lesson on the Holocaust. I draw parallels to the students to see the cruelty of fascist regimes extending to all corners of the world. So in your final clip, you're talking about the next steps for learning. So talk about how today connects to yesterday, connects to their prior knowledge, and how today connects to tomorrow. So one thing I talked about was this theme of dehumanization. So we talked about, we saw that with totalitarian regimes, so that's the prior knowledge. Tomorrow we're going to talk about the Holocaust, dehumanization of the Nazis. So we're continuing this kind of dehumanization theme from yesterday, today, and tomorrow. Does that make sense?
Yes, very good.
All right, and then, yeah. So that was, so then you have your annotations, and then, oops, sorry, sharing all things. Yeah, this CalTPA is a lot, guys. I'm not gonna lie to you, but you just gotta do it. Kind of sucks, but all right. So then you'll do your clips, annotate, and then the last 2 parts, steps 3 and 4, are super easy. So you first have the application, and the last 2 parts are only like a couple pages each. So hold on. Apply. Sorry, I'm trying to remember the order of this now. I haven't done this since, turn this in May or something. Okay, so you're going to reflect first. So you're going to talk about basically how your lesson kind of went. How did your lesson plan work for the whole class? How you supported each student. So this is basically taking what's in your...
Dylan, could you just bring that, the template, let it take up the whole screen?
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, brother.
So what you're doing here in step 3 is you're basically taking your lesson plan rationale and saying how it actually worked in the lesson. So you're going to go back and you're going to cite specific things you did. So for example, you could say in step 1, getting to know students, I wrote about the previous units. So then you can say I crafted my lesson around dehumanization. So you're talking about, you're basically citing stuff from your step 1 or from your clips, and you're saying how, okay, it was able to showcase student learning. So you're basically explaining here what you did and how it can be seen in your lesson, okay? So how did you support student learning? Well, you're going to take from step 1, I wrote about this in my lesson plan, and it can be seen in the clips that I did this, okay? So what you're basically doing for the reflection is you're taking through all these parts what you wrote in your planning, and then you're explaining how it can be seen in your lesson. So that's pretty easy, honestly. All you have to do is just pull out that information, restate it, and say how it was shown in your lesson. So I wrote about, for example, Focus Student 1 had, or Focus Student 3 had anxiety. Well, if you look at clip 3 in my lesson, I used positive language to affirm, okay? So all you're doing in your reflection is taking information from your first 2 templates and expanding upon it a little bit and saying how it can be seen within essentially your lesson. And then finally, the application, this is probably the shortest and easiest part, all right, is you're just saying if you need to reteach it, okay? So you can say, I need to reteach this because out of all my students who turn in work, maybe only 10% is satisfactory job, 10 out of 30. So you can write about how you need to redo things or how you would change things, okay? Then you're going to talk about what you'll teach next. So next I'll teach about the Holocaust, and you can connect about how today's lesson that you did, expanding upon that. And then you write about develop and teach this lesson again, what would you do? Would you do anything different? So you can talk about standards, talk about what you did, okay, what you would want to expand upon from your lesson plan, etc. So that's the CalTPA right there. When you guys submit it, you guys will get results like this, okay? You have an individual rubric for each one that you did, and you're trying to hit at least the level 3 or above.
Right.
So try to hit the level 3, look at the rubrics as you're writing, look what they're asking for specifically, try to include that, all that language, and then you'll get a result like this. You need a 19 on cycle 1 to pass. I can't remember how many rubrics there are. I got a 25. So I hope what I said today helped you guys out a little bit. I'm around, I can hang out for a little bit more to explain any questions.
Yeah, are there you know, are there any questions? And Dylan, you're awesome, dude. Period. That's all there is to it. Are there any other any questions about, you know, anything for Dylan? You know, he's been in the trenches. Anything. This is a good time to engage him in quick conversation. We're going to be bugging out of here in a little bit, but you have some time. Anyone? Nina?
Just one quick question, if that's okay.
How about yeah, we're going to start with Nina and then we'll roll over to you, okay?
Okay.
Thank you very much.
I'm wondering, I think we haven't gone as far as looking at the videos that we're creating or the lesson plans, but are all the annotations, I noticed you had a pattern for like, oh, creating or engaging. Is that like a template that we have that we kind of try to tailor our annotations on?
No, you don't really have a template for the annotations. You just have the titles.
Right.
So take the title as like your launching point that you're trying to do. Just try to incorporate that title somewhere in your annotations. So your annotation is just explaining how that specific idea from the title is in your lesson.
And if you look through the handbook that I gave you a copy of, it gives you all the captions for the 4 main categories of the annotations. Okay, Nina? All right. Ellie?
Yeah, thank you so much, Devin, for explaining everything. I just want to know from you, can you give us like a quick snippet on what the behind the scenes look like when it comes to making like all of our CalTPA stuff and then finalizing it? So like, how often did you reach out for support? Did you always go to your master teacher or your 442F professor? So how did that look like?
Well, the way I work is a little bit different. My brother calls me a crackhead academic. I like do things really fast and like don't think about it. I also like working really fast, but I also kind of subscribe to the mentality of this isn't anything personal. Share this with as many people as you can. One effective thing I would do, talk to your master teacher, see if they've had a student teacher within the last 3 years. Okay, and see if they can put you in contact with that person because they've done the CalTPA recently. They probably have templates. So talk to your master teacher, talk to your people in your class. So form a network of people. Make a Google Doc, make a group chat, something like that. Talk to just talk to people in your class. You know, just work together. In terms of the background on it, I probably started working on it. I think I did all the templates in a weekend. It was like the end of February. I filmed my lesson on like a March 10th, it was like a Wednesday, and then I submitted it on the 15th, but I probably had everything done March 20th, probably took me 3 weeks, a month to do all of it, something like that. About that. The templates probably took me a weekend, doing the PowerPoint, the guide notes, a couple hours. So you minute lesson, and then once you get to step 3 and 4, the planning is what takes the longest part. Once you get to step 3 and 4, you can do that in like an hour or 2.
Right, it's downhill. Very good, Dylan. Brendan?
Yes, for the sort of materials that you created for your class, like, do you often use like Google Docs, or like did your mentor teacher ever show you what other programs you could use to creating the worksheets for your lesson plan?
Well, when I did it, it was on Zoom, so we were basically confined to online only. So the PowerPoint that I made was Google Docs. All the worksheets were just on Google Docs because my school uses Google Classroom, so everything has to be through that. Yeah, so I just created my worksheet, my slides on my own using Google Docs and the textbook reference material.
Thank you.
That makes sense. Thank you.
How about Brother Anthony? Oh no, how about Simone and then Anthony?
Hi, my question was, so you have 3 focus students. If one of them is not present when you're getting your video evidence, is that evidence then void, or is it more about the lesson plan?
No. So those students are supposed to be anonymous. So you're not going to be filming your video and like saying, this is my English learner right here. No. Okay. You just need students in the clips. The observer should have no idea who your focus students are. And if one of them's not there, okay, you're not there that lesson, use data from a previous lesson to talk. Okay? Because if you're using lessons that are similar, it can be that different. So ideally your students would all be there, but if they're not there the day you film, make an educated guess on how they would have done. Sounds kind of messed up, but that's what I would recommend you do.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Thank you. Anthony.
I'm assuming most of us are in person this semester teaching. So how do you suggest or recommend we position the camera in the room when we film?
Well, you don't have to just have one status. You can, like, for example, let's say your first clip or your welcome students in, you could have that in the back of the class. I would recommend try to get as many students as possible. When you're trying to do the discussions, you can always move the camera where it's focused just on one group of students. So the positioning of the camera honestly depends on what part of the lesson you're filming. So most of the time I would recommend have it maybe the back of the class or an angle where you can see you and students, because you always need students present, you need them speaking in clips. But when it comes to discussion, make sure the audio is really good. So you can always move the camera a little bit closer. You just can't have video clips that have been edited.
Right.
So it's got to be a 5-minute clip, 3-minute clip. You have a cut halfway through where they think you edited it, you're getting a 0 on that.
Right.
So position the camera doesn't matter. Doesn't matter that the first, to my knowledge, doesn't matter that the first clip is the back of the class. Doesn't matter it's the second clips. You know, one group, smaller group of students or half the class. But just don't edit those clips. Just don't edit and cut it halfway through and splice things together, because then you're gonna fail automatically.
Right.
Got it. And how many clips do we need? Do we need to film like?
You're gonna have 3
5-minute lessons. I'm sorry.
3 5-minute clips. So you're gonna have a total map. They don't need to be 5 minutes. I would recommend trying to make them 5 minutes because more material is better. But you'll have a total of max of 15 minutes. Dude, 5 minutes on the dot. You make that thing 5 minutes and 1 second, that observer's not gonna look at anything. They don't look at anything past 5 minutes in a clip.
Right. Thank you, Anthony. How about Nicholas and then Eric, and then Eric's gonna walk us out of this.
Okay, so my question is regarding the video clips. Now, I know we're supposed to have students in the clips as well. Is there anything where we have to be careful where, you know, we cannot show students' faces on there, or is that okay if they're visible on the clips?
Oh, well, they need to be visible, so you need to show their faces. You need their permission first off. So probably you need to sign permission slips. The CTC has a standard one you can use depending on your district. Sometimes the kids sign a liability waiver at the beginning of high school, so you can film anyway. I would recommend just getting that CTC permission slip signed just to CYA a little bit. But just don't say their last name. That's the only thing you don't want. It doesn't matter. Like, you can say their first name as much as you want. I actually accidentally said the last name of one of my students in the clip. Didn't fail. But probably try to avoid last names to say their first name.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Dylan. Eric, you're gonna take us home.
All right. So do they get two quick questions? Do they have to get the permission slip signed by their parents as well, or do they just have to sign it?
Students have to have their parents sign it.
Yes,
okay,
definitely.
All right, cool. And then my second question is, for the annotated clips, do they have to be on 3 separate lessons, or could they all be on the same lesson?
You're filming one lesson.
One lesson. Okay.
CalTPA is one lesson.
One lesson.
2, next semester, it's 3 to 5 different lessons. But cycle 1, you're filming one lesson.
Exactly.
Okay, perfect. And you're just kind of like dividing it up into your different parts.
Yeah, you're gonna have 3 clips, but all from the same lesson. So for that 55 minutes, it's all gonna be one thing. It's like that.
It's like you do that whole lesson and you grab those clips out of there. Okay, thank you, Eric.
Thank you.
Hi, I have 2 really quick questions.
You know, I really can't hear you. It's way too noisy in your backdrop.
Can I just type them in the chat, Professor?
Yeah. Kyle, and then Nina, and then I think that might be it. Kyle, talk to me.
Okay. So for the actual annotations, if there's something on the video where you annotate it and it just has a time frame, or do you physically have to do the annotations in something like a Google Excel sheet or something of that sort?
So when you do the annotations, you're going to actually, when you enter them in the CTC system, it'll be on their website. So there's a little, like, it's almost like a taskbar tool, but I put mine in an Excel spreadsheet just because I could copy and paste them over, just to stay a little bit more organized on my behalf.
Okay. Okay. So normally it's you pick a time frame and then you type in your comment through the CTC website.
Yeah.
Okay.
Your video will be there and you'll be able to load it and thanks, Dylan. Nina, and that's going to be it for the day. Nina, talk to us.
I'm wondering about the permission from parents. If the school already has permission, I'm specifically in music, so sometimes, you know, the choir director will record students. If they already have something in place, can we use that?
Yes, you can.
Okay.
Couple questions in the chat I want to answer real quick.
Yeah.
Let's score out of the maximum score you can get on the TPA is 40. You need a 19 out of 40 to pass. So you can get up to, I think, a 1-on-1 rubric. The way they grade it is the rubrics are scored from 1 to 5. They start out at a 3. It's bad, they go down. If it's good, they go up. But they start at a 3. Okay. Yeah. So if you don't have one of your focus students in the video, that's okay. You just need students in the video. I don't think any of my focus students are actually even in my video because they had their stupid cameras off during Zoom.
All right, folks. Dylan, so much for taking the time, brother, and being with us. We really appreciate you a great deal. Your email is f@fjusd.org, right?
That's my school email.
Yeah. Okay, that's cool. All right, yeah, cool. So let's give a little round of applause here. I mean, we really appreciate you, man, going through step by step and helping us out. It's I think this is rich as far as I'm concerned. So Dylan, thank you, man. I was right when I pegged you earlier. You're a good egg. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for your time. I know this has been a lot in a short time frame, but I do appreciate your patience and all your questions. Keep pushing forward. You have to get this done. And I have to tell you, I think cycle 1 is a very clean, I don't want to say easy, but it's a manageable process. Cycle 2 gets a little more, there's so many different levels to it. This one is just clean and straightforward. And I think a lot of things that Dylan was saying, he was like, just cut the fat and get to the point. Don't try to hide, don't play games, lay it all out so the assessor knows what you're doing, they get it, and they understand, and they move on to the next point, all right? All right, everybody, listen, I'm at your disposal. Feel free to hit me up with emails, contact me, and we'll keep building and growing together. And then the last thing as we walk out of here, I made a mistake on the dates. One date I put October 19th. That's incorrect. It's October 22nd, not October 19th. And a lot of people called me on that. October 19th is a Tuesday. October 22nd is a Friday. Our next meeting is going to be on October 15th, all right? October 15th, then I'll see you again October 22nd. And if there are more days, but I'll hit you up with some more emails. Have a great weekend, folks. Thank you for your time. I appreciate you. And there it is.
So we don't meet up on October 1st. We're meeting October 15th.
Oh, you know, dude, see, you guys got to help me. October 1st, there's a meeting. October 15th, there's a meeting. And October
22nd.
22nd. Those are our next meeting dates. And thank you so much for bringing them. October 1st, October 15th, October 22nd, okay?
Understood.
All right.
See you next week.
Thank you guys. Take care of yourself. Have a great weekend, all right?
Thank you.
Thank you.